fam, today I'm going to channel some Sam Mitchell via Collapse Chronicles for this article out of The Guardian on the subject matter of green politics. So, it is brought to us by Fiona Harvey. Fiona, take it away. The climate crisis. The climate crisis. The headline reads, "Our children face wars over food and water," EU deputy warns. An exclusive. Franz Timmermans says older people need to make sacrifices to protect the future. Yes. Older people will have to make sacrifices in the fight against climate change, or today's children will face a future of fighting for water and food, the EU deputy chief warned. Franz Timmermans, vice president of the EU Commission, said that if social policy and climate policy are not combined to share fairly the costs and benefits of creating a low-carbon economy, the world will face a backlash from people who fear losing jobs or income, stoked by populist politicians and fossil fuel interests. He said, quote, "It's not just an urgent matter, it's a difficult matter. We have to transform our economy. There are huge benefits, but it's a huge challenge. The biggest threat is this social one. If we don't fix this, our children will be waging wars over water and food. There is no doubt in my mind." Yes. Tackling climate change will be many times cheaper than disruption that global heating will cause, as well as bringing benefits to health, and the costs have fallen dramatically in recent years. However, the shift away from fossil fuels will mean the end of some traditional jobs such as coal mining, and the cost of change will fall unequally on different sectors of society unless politicians step in. Quote, "Where I see huge risk is that you get an alliance between those who don't want change because they see their interest affected, whether it's in fossil fuels or in traditional economic circles," quote, Timmerman told the Guardian in an interview. Quote, "Those interests combine with the fear of negative social consequences, then you get a counter momentum where people say, hang on, not too fast, people can't stomach this." Quote, right. He said, "Those of us who understand we need to move fast should make this social issue the pivotal issue in all of this. I really call upon all of those in the climate movement to join me in focusing on the social issue more than they've done in the past, because this could become the biggest stumbling block." He warned that sacrifices would be needed from the older generations to ensure that young people can live in a safe climate. Today's older people were the beneficiaries of a previous generation's sacrifice and were now being called on to make the changes themselves, he said. Quote, "Sometimes I wonder whether we are aware of the transformation we are heading to and how profound it is. It's an effort comparable to restructuring after a violent conflict. I used this talk to my grandparents and my parents about how they saw this after the war. They said, well, we sacrificed a lot because we knew our children would be better off." Yes. And this feeling is not yet there in our society. Quote, "Changing people's lives today would be difficult, but the benefits would be felt by today's children," he added. "This is for politics is huge, huge challenge. We need to recapture that feeling of purpose, doing something not for yourself but for others, which I think has always led to society being at its best," end quote. Any sacrifice would be mild for most, such as the inconvenience of having a house renovated to low carbon standards or switching to electric transport and eating less meat. But for some, it could involve a change of living or living patterns. We're not asking people to go back to the 1930s situation, quote. We're not asking people to live in caves and munch grass. It's taking perhaps 1 or 2 steps back to be able to jump much further in the future, end quote. Timmerman's warnings reflect a growing concern among climate experts that politicians have failed to show the people the benefits of low-carbon society, which include cleaner air and water, more livable cities, and higher levels of health and well-being, as well as diffusing the climate crisis. Politicians, including Donald Trump and Republicans in the U.S., have presented tackling climate breakdown as a cost, and many people are fearful of losing their jobs. Timmerman acknowledges that some people in traditional industries would have to change and said the main role for politicians was to make this easier. Reskilling people in industries such as fossil fuel and power generation would be key. He pointed to Poland, which is highly dependent on coal. Quote, they have a very high level of engineering, education, and there's a huge potential there and a low carbon economy for a country like Poland. And there simply isn't any future in coal. The longer you protract the change, the more painful and the costly will be. Quote, yes. Timmermans has a pivotal role this year within the EU and globally as he leads the bloc's Green Deal, intended to transform the European economy to a low-carbon footing, and leads the bloc's climate efforts at COP26. Final UN climate talks to be hosted by the UK and Glasgow this November. On Thursday, he traveled to London for his first official visit outside Brussels since the pandemic lockdown began, with a 4-hour meeting in Downing Street with Alok Sharma, the UK COP26 president and host of the talks. He's in a weekly contact with John Kerry, climate envoy to the US Joe Biden, and China's top official Xing Zhenhua. The EU has put in law its own climate target of cutting emissions by at least 55% by 2030 compared to the 1999 levels. This is one of the most stretching climate targets yet put forward alongside those in the UK and the US, though campaigners said that the bloc could do better and called for a 60% target. Yes, Timmermans said that no further improvement of the emissions target was possible, but he said that the EU member states that to come forward with more money for climate finance assistance from both rich to poor countries to help them cut emissions and cope with the impacts of climate breakdown. Our approach is ambitious. Quote, I think we've set the stage. I hope others will follow that example and see what UK is doing. That's even slightly more ambitious than what we're doing, but then all the others still have a lot of catching up to do. I think the onus here is not on the EU nor on the UK. Yes. So right there we have some bold words from our EU Deputy Chief, warning that if we don't get our act together fast, we are going downhill rapidly. What would it take to ensure the survivability of our children and our own future? Well, I'm going to play a real quick, not going to overwhelm you, Zoom presentation that will state our necessary goals right now.
Here's what the pathway looks like for meeting the upper Paris target. This is the so-called well below 2 or close to 2 actually. And this is already dangerous territory. But to meet it now, we're in 2020, here's what we need to do. At least a 50% reduction by 2030. More would be better. And at a minimum, net zero by 2040. But look, if we delay only 5 years, it becomes impossible. We need to totally decarbonize in 10 years. So this is really an emergency situation. So our emergency is here. We have no time left before we start a deep emission reduction trajectory. This is indeed a climate emergency. The students are indeed right.
Okay, so now we're all clear on what we need to do. Now I'm going to play a short clip from Dr. Peter Wadhams will present the effects of losing Arctic sea ice on our food production.
The Arctic, because the Arctic is warming faster than the tropics, the air mass over the Arctic Ocean is getting warmer relative to the air mass over the tropics. That temperature difference is reduced, and that reduces the strength of the wind that separates these two air masses, called the jet stream. The jet stream takes on this lobed pattern, and with a lobed pattern, you find that allows cold air to come from the Arctic to come down to lower latitudes, and warm air from the tropics to rise to higher latitudes. So in between, where the jet stream is sitting, we have extreme weather events, either hot or cold, and that just happens to be where we grow most of our crops. So there's a threat to the productivity of the planet for growing food crops, and that's something which is having a bigger and bigger effect. We can detect it just from the price of food. The UN has a food price index for the average price of food worldwide. They started it at 100 in the year 2000, and it's already gone up to beyond 200. Came down, went up again, and that's causing tremendous hardship in cities in the third world where people can't grow their own crops and are very poor. So it's causing a lot of violent unrest. Also, as the temperature rises generally, the yield of all of the food crops that we have is beginning to go down, and if as temperature rise gets greater,
and consider making small changes to your life, yes, and mailing your local congressman and city leader on making changes fast. Otherwise, your soul is mine. Thanks for watching. Talk to you later.